gray hair. Does that mean my driving days are numbered? That's this week on Motoring 98.
TSN's Motoring 98 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And Midas Car Care, the way it should be.
Hello everyone and welcome to Motoring 98. You know, this may not come as earth-shattering news, but we're getting older. And like a fine wine, we can only hope that the older we get, the better we get. But let's face it, things do begin to deteriorate with age, like eyesight, coordination. Next thing you know, everybody's telling you you're too old to drive a car. Well, this week, we're going to meet some men and women who are determined to stay behind the wheel and who believe that age should not be a drawback.
Turn your quarter right and 2 Charleston.
This may come as a surprise to the younger generation, but many of today's seniors are more active now than ever before. This senior center is busy with activities every day of the week. Some are even going back to school. This course is called 55 Alive. The subject, driver education.
You're in the right-hand lane. You will make your right turn from the right lane neatly and cleanly into the right lane. My youngest attendee was approximately 44. My oldest was 95. Type of people who want to ensure that they keep up their driving standards. People who want to ensure that they drive safely and are able to maintain their driving privilege for many, many years to come. The course consists of 4 sessions of 2.5 hours each over 4 separate days, where we deal with defensive driving, facts, rules of the road, etc. We also I add into the course a 1-hour in-car evaluation at the end of the course, where we'll go out in the vehicle and evaluate the driving skills. They want to learn. They understand that over the years they've let their standards drop. They understand that over the years they haven't kept up with the rules of the road. And they're wonderful, wonderful to teach to.
I haven't driven for very much, for about 16 years, although I've had my license for about 45. But my husband has a medical problem and he is not allowed to do driving, so I just decided that I should make my driving better.
Uncontrolled intersection. Now let's get this clear. An uncontrolled intersection is an intersection where there are no stop signs, no traffic lights. The law says when 2 cars get there at the same time, the car on the left yields to the car on the right. And when it is safe to do so, then we will make our move.
Well, it became a time where I was reaching that lovely age of the big 8-0, and I decided that I'd like to update my written test. I think my driving could be a little bit better than what I'm doing, but where I go is to my socials, my card games, and my shopping. But I stay in a certain area because I have no need to drive the car at any distance, so I find it quite all right just to maintain it for that reason.
All right, but don't you think by walking like this, you stand more chance of tripping on that sidewalk because you don't know what's coming up there. You don't know what's coming up there, you're just looking here. Whereas if I'm walking straight ahead like this, I'm keeping my eyes up. Now I can see that where the sidewalk is going to create a problem. I'm looking well ahead of me.
Well, for starters, I'll be coming up for my driver's test in December. That'll be my 80th birthday. And I know for a positive fact that I've developed a lot of bad habits over the last 65 years. And I'd like to brush up on them as much as possible because I feel I do need a car. A car is very important to me. It gets me out, gets me around. I get to the YMCA and go to various places. And I'm getting much more conscious of how many drivers I see on the road that are not using the rules of the road like they should, and how much I was breaking them myself in the past, and how much I have to brush up on this work to get my driver's test.
Certainly, I have no problem with discussing with somebody. If I feel they should give up their driving, I don't have a problem with sitting down and talking to them about it. At first, they're not going to like it. But once they realize that their lives are at stake, not only their lives are at stake, their families' lives, their children's lives. What about the lives of others on the road? And then people begin to realize this.
My son says you don't really need to drive a car for the little time you use it. It's a lot of expense. But I do have to have a little luxury in life, and that is my luxury, which I enjoy. I would miss it.
And I'm actually getting from them a new zest of life. These are people 80, 90 years old who've got a tremendous zest for life. And I think one can learn a lot from them.
Hey, you know I'm supportive of anybody teaching anybody how to drive better, but you also know I've got a comment. That's later on Kenzie's Corner.
You know, of late, Chrysler have been on a real tear, releasing a ton of new product, and it's been diversified all the way from the quad cab Ram pickup to the outrageous Prowler. Well, on this edition of Test Drive, we take a look at their very latest, the all-new 300M. While it is true that the 300 shares its basic structure with the Intrepid and Concorde, it's very different in nature. It's also considerably stiffer. 37% better in torsional and 46% in bending. The 300M uses gas-charged McPherson struts and coil springs at all four corners with roll bars at both ends. The M handled the pylon test surprisingly well, especially when you consider its physical size. The only anomaly is that when pushed quickly, the tyres deliver an audible warning as they near the limit of adhesion. This surprised me because they are 17-inch low-profile tyres. The optional handling package addresses this situation, albeit with smaller 16-inch V-rated tyres. As with all new engines, this Chrysler has a tuned intake manifold. At low engine speeds, it actually operates as two 3-cylinder engines. This plenum feeding these three, this plenum feeding these three. As the demand for air grows with engine speed, this center plenum opens, and they do that with this little valve. The three-stage strategy results in 200 pounds-feet of torque or more anywhere between 2,000 RPM and the red line. On the road, this gives the engine a V8-like feel with a fast tip-in and good mid-range. Wind the engine up into the upper end of the rev range and it still pulls without developing an abundance of noise. What does filter back seems to reinforce the sporty flavour of the car. Matched with this engine is a 4-speed automatic that features Chrysler's auto stick. What would a test drive be without a pet peeve? Well, on this 300M, it has to do with the manual mode and the auto stick. While you can nudge it down and set the car up for a fast sweeper, as you slow down or speed up, it automatically upshifts and downshifts. If they're going to give you a manual mode, for goodness sake, make it manual. The brakes are of the 4-wheel disc variety with full anti-lock. On the skid pad, I recorded stopping distances of just 114 feet from 80 kilometers an hour. The pedal feel is firm and fairly easily modulated. The 300 has functional air scoops that direct cool air directly onto the front brakes. This means less fade and longer rotor life. At the launch of this car, John Hurlitz, who's the Vice President of Design at Chrysler, suggested that this trunk was Hoffa-sized. Well, the trunk on the 300M is enormous. The neat part being that every single square inch is usable. There's no hockey-style hinges to crush anything placed up against the side. Rather, what you've got is cantilever hinges. And you know, as I'm apt to say, it's the small things that make the big difference. Standard stuff includes power locks, windows, mirrors, power heated front seats with a 2-position memory for the driver. The memory also resets the radio and mirrors. Automatic climate control and a decent radio which can be upgraded to an 11-speaker Infinity sound system for just $110. You'll also find a compass, outside temperature reading and a trip computer. The best part is what I consider to be the most attractive and functional set of gauges offered on any vehicle at any price. The other item worthy of note is a real clock. This new 300M is more than up to the philosophy started way back in 1955 when Chrysler launched the original leather car. That philosophy was to deliver a full-size vehicle that didn't come completely unraveled the instant you started to push it. Indeed, when you consider the dimensions, this car qualifies as sporty.
Time to update our long-term Subaru Forester. This week we look at the results of good and bad design. On the good side, a versatile and spacious cargo area. On the bad side, the corner of this back door is lethal. I have smacked my head on it. Our cameraman Kevin just hit his head on it. In fact, he did it twice, but that's another problem. My advice, wear a helmet or keep your head down. Let's check out up front. Now, most dashboards simply collect dust, but Subaru have come up with this nifty little compartment, great for things like sunglasses. But moving south, you've got a control area that's terrific. Big controls, easy to access, until you want a cup of coffee. Then, not only does it hide those great controls, if you happen to spill coffee, well, you know the end result. My advice, cut down on your caffeine intake. All that aside, the on-road drivability of the Forester is exactly what you might expect from Subaru. First class.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the world premiere showing of the all-new Acura TLX. Well, this is a concept car. However, it's very, very close to what the production car is going to be. We decided instead of making some radical car and then coming out with an average car, we would show you exactly what, or pretty close to what the car is going to be, and this is it. This one we call the near luxury. It's in around the $30,000 bracket. It goes against the ES300, the C Series Mercedes, and the 3 Series BMW. However, this car is the second car for Acura that was designed and conceived, engineered, and will be produced totally in America. Not only produced totally in America, but this car will also be exported back to Japan, which kind of helps our economy.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns DRL. When I say DRL, that's an abbreviation for daytime running lamps. And all vehicles sold in Canada since 1990 contain some form of a DRL module or daytime running lamp module that controls the operation of the headlights. It switches on the headlights and many times the running lights and parking lights on the vehicle after certain parameters are met. The engine has to be running, oftentimes the parking brake released. But in a nutshell, what these things do is run the high beam filament of your headlamps at a reduced voltage, usually about half the normal voltage. Now, when these DRL modules fail, a couple of different scenarios will unfold. Typically on Ford products, you'll notice that the daytime running lamps will get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until they're just about like a candle. Eventually they'll go out. On General Motors and Chrysler products, you'll often notice that when the DRL module fails, it'll keep the headlights and or the parking lights on after the vehicle is shut off. You can't shut them off, and obviously in short order you've got a dead battery. Locating and unplugging the DRL module will temporarily rectify the situation, but sooner or later you're going to have to replace that module in order to restore normal operation of the daytime running lamps. That's your Midas tip of the week.
A portion of Motoring 98 is brought to you by the Solder Seal Gunk family of automotive products, makers of Puncture Seal Gold and Liquid Wrench.
Well, a Mustang is a horse that's born in the wild. He's just like any wild animal. He doesn't have any owner, and he runs wild until someone captures him, and he could be any breed, and then he has descendants, and then they were just born in the wild, and that's what they are, wild horses. And basically the ones I've had experience with, they're all extra strong because they've had to fend for themselves. And by the most part, they've wonderful disposition because it's the first time they've ever had in their life that some kind treatment, that they have had feed and been cared for.
Mustang, to me, has the opportunity to greatly improve the image of the company, to be a sales improvement because it'll, I think, have significant sales improvement over the former model, and then bring in the youth back to Ford and really improve our image. I think that's one of our real pluses with this vehicle. Mustang is a love affair. When the 64 Mustang came out, people had a love affair. And it will be very, very nice to generate a lot of traffic in showrooms as people come back to fall in love with the Mustang.
Out at the Ford Pavilion, there's a daydream corner called Mustang. This is the car that dreams are made of. Dream your own Mustang. Take your choice of a 6 or 3 V8s. Power steering, power brakes, automatic or standard transmission, dozens of options. But as standard equipment, you get bucket seats, wall-to-wall carpeting, all vinyl upholstery, padded instrument panel, and full wheel covers. Even though Mustang is a dream, its low price is a beautiful reality. Test drive one right now at your Ford dealers in Pleasant Dreams.
Most of what Teddy teaches in 55 Alive concerns driving, but there is a limited amount of mechanical advice, mostly to do with getting your car properly serviced. But it gave me an idea. Think about it. 30 years from now, our own Bill Gardner, a senior himself, conducting an auto mechanics class. And you know what? I bet you he'll still have his pickup truck parked out back. How about it, Bill?
Well, Brad, excuse the pun, but you know I'm just a pup. I'm not quite ready to think about being a senior citizen yet, but we'll cross that bridge when it comes. Anyhow, what I want to talk about this week is some advice for motorists, young or old, and that's about making a quick visual inspection of the cooling system hoses in your car, because sometimes there's obvious visual signs that there's a hose about to blow, and if you pick up on these, you might just save yourself being stranded on the side of the road. Now I'm going to sit Alex down in the back of the pickup, and by the way, the pickup's running so good, I can see it still being around in 30 years, and maybe I won't be. Anyhow, let's have a look under the hood of this car and show you what we're talking about. Now this particular car was in the shop last week with a stalling complaint, and while we were in the process of checking that out and test running the engine, we noticed a couple of stains in critical areas. There was one on the inlet heater hose and another stain on the exhaust crossover pipe right below the upper rad hose. Closer inspection revealed that both those hoses had flaws. The heater hose had a little pore in it and a stain around that area and a real slow leak. And the upper rad hose was split as a result of corrosion on the nipple where that hose goes onto the engine. It had actually stretched the hose so tight in that one area that it had started to cause the hose to fray and burst. Now, by picking up on something like this early and changing these parts before they actually burst and fail, we've probably averted a pretty serious overheat on this engine and probably some kind of a roadside breakdown. Now, heater hoses and rad hoses on many of today's cars, in fact most of today's cars, are particular to the make, model, and year of that car. The days of just going to the local garage and getting a rad hose or a heater hose that'll fit your car are pretty much gone. You've almost got to go to the dealer or a parts depot and specify exactly the hose you need for the application. So if you happen to get broken down with a burst one on the road, your chances of finding the right one are not too good. So it's real important to check these things out and change them before they fail. That gives you the time to hunt down the correct part. Here at the shop, we've got the luxury of collecting that coolant into a pan while we change the offending hoses, but you're not always so lucky. If you get a coolant leak in your car, there's a real good chance you're going to notice a pool or puddle of coolant somewhere underneath that vehicle. It's a real hazard if you've got children or pets around, because ethylene glycol, the coolant solution that's used in most cars today, is extremely toxic. You want to make sure that you absorb it or cover it and make sure that you pick it all up before your children or pets can get near it. They tend to be attracted to it, and pets will take a lick of it, and in many cases it can be their last one. So make sure that you take real care around that stuff and get it all picked up. Oh, and one more good reason, to own a pickup truck, Brad. Alex's food dish, hubcap right off a Chevy pickup truck. And her water dish, a GMC pickup truck hubcap. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 98.
Earlier in the show, we had a feature on a group of people that are trying to improve the driving skills of senior citizens. I fully support this. Hey, this gray hair is real, and so are these multifocals. But what's got me worried are the older drivers. I'm talking 75 and 80 years of age. You know, in Ontario, it used to be mandatory for people to take a driver's test at age 80. Nowadays, well, my mother-in-law turned 80 recently. She walked into a room with a bunch of other seniors. The examiner talked to each one of them. And if you figured you could walk and chew gum without falling over, you walked out of there with your driver's license intact. Now, I think this is nuts. Now, I'm not saying older people can't drive properly. I mean, half the NASCAR field is over 55. But if you can drive and you're over 80, why should you be afraid to show it to somebody? Now, I know all sorts of children and grandchildren who are petrified that their senior relatives are still out on the street. They know they're dangerous. But are you going to tell your granddad he can't have a license anymore? I mean, I think everybody should be retested every 5 years, no matter how old they are or young they are. So should seniors. I mean, if the government doesn't stop these bad older drivers, who is? A telephone pole? A transport truck? It could be one of your or my children. I'm Jim Kenzie.
You know, after spending a good part of the day here at this senior center, you realize that while, yes, it would be nice to be able to drive in our senior years, that's really not what's important. What we hope for is to be healthy and fit. Maybe more importantly, as we've seen here today, also to possess a positive attitude towards life. That's it for now. We'll see you next week for more stories about cars and the people who drive.
You enter a 3-lane highway and there are no other vehicles ahead of you. Which is the safest lane to travel in?
We've got North Peel.
The middle lane.
Incorrect.
TSN's Motoring 98 has been brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And Midas Car Care, the way it should be.